The Old Testament has a funny place in our lives as Christians often. I find myself sometimes not quite knowing what to do with Old Testament readings. Perhaps you feel that way too sometimes. A friend of mine recently actually asked the question, why do we even bother reading the Old Testament in church? Why don't we just focus on the gospel? That's where all the good stuff is. And in the parish I served at last, we did a scripture study that covered some of the more challenging parts of the Old Testament. And so I sent out a survey, and I asked people to tell me a little bit about how they read the Bible, if they read the Bible. And lots of people were really honest about how they like to just skip over some of the more challenging parts in the Old Testament. The same kind of sentiment as my friend. You know, the good stuff is really in the New Testament. The stuff that we can sink into, the stuff that we can maybe do something with. So what do we do with readings, like our reading this morning from 2 Kings? I particularly like the character Naaman from 2 Kings. It's one of my favorites from that section of the Bible, from the historical books. And one of the reasons I love Naaman so much is that I think when we look at the story in its fullness, there's a little more that we'll add on to the reading that was read this morning. When we look at it in its fullness, we actually come to see that it tells us something about how we read the Old Testament, how we hold not just the scripture we like, but the whole suite of scripture that tells us the story of God's salvation, God's relentless pursuit of us, calling us forward into newer and better and fuller understandings of Him and our relationship with Him. So Naaman is essentially a kind of rock star from the ancient world. He is a military commander with lots and lots of money, lots and lots of power and prestige. I don't know if you caught it, but in the reading we're told that he was told to go and talk to the king of Israel by an Israeli slave who he had taken in one of his conquests. What that means, of course, is that he's not exactly on the friendliest terms with Israel. Israel has lost battles against the king of Aram, against Naaman. So there's this power imbalance right from the beginning, where Israel has every reason to be afraid of Naaman and the army that he commands. So when the king sends a letter to the king of Israel saying, you should cleanse my servant Naaman of his leprosy, the king is afraid. He doesn't have the power to cure leprosy. But he thinks that if he doesn't do it, that the armies of Aram will come and they will strike down Israel. It's worth pointing out here that leprosy isn't the kind of disease that comes to mind where limbs are falling off. This is probably a kind of psoriasis. But this was a real social problem for Naaman. He had everything else, everything the world tells him he should want. But somehow his life was not well. He wasn't living the way that he thought he should, and somehow he wasn't satisfied. So Naaman eventually ends up in front of the prophet Elisha. The assumption all the way along has been that the place of power, the place of true healing, is going to be through the kings. Naaman goes to his king, who goes to the king of Israel. But it turns out that that's not actually where the action is. It's actually with this prophet, out past the confines of the power and the authority in the land. So Naaman arrives, and he's expecting the kind of welcome that a person of his stature deserves. He's expecting that Elisha is going to come out and greet him, and that there will be fanfare, and that something extraordinary will happen. But Elisha doesn't even come out. Naaman maybe has never experienced this kind of greeting before in his whole life. And he is angry about it. And then to make matters worse, Elisha's messenger simply tells him that he should go and bathe in the river 7 times. And so he finds himself saying, how ridiculous is this? I've traveled all of this distance. I've brought this incredible wealth with me to give to the one who can cure me of my leprosy. And you want me to bathe in the river? How silly. But he's reminded that even though it's simple, maybe that's more reason. If you would have done challenging things, then perhaps you should just demonstrate some faith and go and bathe in the river. And so he does. And he's cleansed and made whole. And so at this moment, we should pause for a moment, because already this story that maybe at first glance seemed antiquated and strange starts to sound a little bit familiar. This person, this man of strength and power and money, who is unfulfilled, who is not whole, goes seeking for a remedy in places of power, but doesn't find it. Instead, he finds it with a man of God, who tells him to do something so simple that it's almost offensive. It's utterly foolish. And yet when he does it, he has an encounter with God and he is made whole. This should remind us of baptism. We should pause and realize that there's a theme here. There's an echo of the gospel, even in this unlikely book written many generations before John the Baptist and Jesus. And yet we see the rebirth of the new life in baptism here as Naaman is washed in the river. But the story doesn't end there. Naaman goes back to Elisha and tries to give him some of the incredible wealth that he's brought. And Elisha won't take it because that's not where the action is. And then Naaman does something really strange. He says to Elisha, okay, fine, you won't take my wealth. Can I take 2 mule loads full of earth, of dirt, back home with me? This is a really strange request, right? To our ears, why on earth would you want 2 mule loads, whatever amount that is? It sounds like a lot. Why would you want to take that home with you? Naaman has had this incredibly profound experience where his whole worldview has shifted. He says, now I know that there is only the Lord of Israel, that this is true God. I've experienced it. I've seen it. And for him, this is a profound thing to say. Because in the ancient world, especially if you're a Gentile, you understand that there are many gods that compete with one another. And they live in different areas of the world. So if you visit a foreign land, you can't worship your own God anymore. Because they're not there. So you go to where you can worship your God. So on the one hand, Naaman has this incredible, this profound insight, this epiphany, where he says, there is only one Lord. There is only the God of Israel. But then, in spite of this profound understanding, he can't help but fall back in old categories of thinking. So he figures, if he's going to worship this God when he goes home, he needs some soil, some earth from Israel, so that he can spread it out and have a little piece of Israel to praise God on. Because in his mind, that's how it works. And so how funny that on the one hand, he sees this truth. He glimpses something that is life-changing, that is extraordinary, that makes him whole. He comes to know God. But even at the same time, he's stuck in old ways of thinking. He's got this piece of revelation, but at the same time, he's stuck with a particular worldview that shows us something of the culture that he lives in. How true this is, I think, of all times, but also of us. I know that I find myself in this kind of position all the time, where you think you've got something new and exciting figured out, and you realize that in fact, you've only got a piece of the puzzle, that you're still stuck in old ways of thinking. You haven't quite figured out how the picture fits together as a whole. And I think this tells us something about how we read parts of the Old Testament that trouble us. Things that make us say, can we just skip ahead to the Gospels? Even as Scripture is God-inspired, even as it contains pieces of truth that are extraordinary and revelatory, that propel us forward, that are revolutionary, that are progressive, we also come up against parts that tell us about the culture of the time, about the people of the time. Because God doesn't change, but people do, and slowly. And so even as we encounter God, we might take a step or two forward, and we find ourselves also taking a step back. But then Naaman says to Elisha, and here's the problem. I'm going to go home, and because I'm the commander in this army, I'm going to have to go and worship the God that the king worships. If I don't, I'm going to be in trouble. So can I be pardoned for bowing down before this other God? I know it's wrong. I know this isn't the true God, but I don't know what else to do. And so all Alicia says is go in peace. It seems that even though we find ourselves stuck in these moments where we have a piece of the truth, we've seen something new, we don't have it all figured out, and we're kind of stuck in our culture and in our place, God is patient with us. God, through Alicia, says, it's okay. Go in peace. It's a little bit like the truth that we find in Scripture and in our own relationships with God as community and as individuals. It's like we're building a big tower or a structure, and you place blocks on top of one another. The blocks may be equal, but as you build them, you get higher, right? I think Scripture operates this way. I think our relationships with God operate this way. Because God is out in front of us, pulling us into fuller, deeper, truer, more complete understandings of who He is and who we are. But even though we don't get it all right all at once, even though change takes time, God's patient with us, saying to us, go in peace. So my friends, if we find the courage and the strength to crack open our Bibles this summer and read some of the more challenging passages from books like Leviticus or Exodus or Isaiah, any of those parts that we shy away from, may we read them like Naaman, knowing that we will find extraordinary life-changing glimpses of God. We might also find things that see us trapped, falling into old ways of thinking. But in the midst of that struggle, may we know that we do this alongside of God, who tells us now and always, go in peace.